Coming up on Network Africa. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and his rival Riek Machar meet with the Pope at the Vatican. Protests continue in Algeria, where citizens are demanding the resignation of the entire ruling class. And the UN postpones its planned Libya National Conference due to renewed fighting. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. We begin today in North Africa, where South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and his rival, the former rebel leader Riek Machar, are meeting at the Vatican for a two-day retreat aimed at reconciliation and prayer. It's a diplomatic initiative led by Pope Francis and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. The global heads of Protestant and the Catholic churches invited South Sudan's political leaders to Rome in an effort to consolidate the fragile peace agreement signed last September to end a civil war that has devastated the world's youngest country. The two are expected to attend the spiritual retreat, which will take place in Santa Marta, the Vatican guest house where Pope Francis lives. In 2013, the two leaders clashed, leading to a civil war that left 400,000 people dead. Joining us live from Rome is VOA's Sabina Castelfranco. Sabina, thank you for joining us on Network Africa. What can we expect from this two-day retreat at the Vatican, which South Sudan's President Salva Kiir and his rival Riek Machar are attending?
We certainly can expect a lot of prayers, gatherings, with different members present. They're going to be reflecting, meditating on what is coming up in this country. Of course, May 12th is going to be the beginning of something completely new in the country. And so the Pope has wanted to gather all the leaders, and it's going to be 4 of the vice presidents, the upcoming vice presidents, with the president of South Sudan, and with 8 members of the Council of the Church in Sudan. And of course, there will also be at the final meeting Pope Francis himself and the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was the person who actually proposed this meeting to Pope Francis, and then Pope Francis agreed to the meeting. So it's going to be a very special occasion for all of these leaders to get together and reflect on the opportunity for peace in South Sudan.
Well, what makes this retreat different from other peace initiatives that have been made in the past?
Well, there hasn't ever been something quite like this. Of course, we know South Sudan is a very new country, and really the Pope's desire was to actually travel to South Sudan. He last month received the president of South Sudan at the Vatican. It was the middle of this past month of March, and he expressed the desire of visiting South Sudan, and he not only wanted to go himself, but he wanted the Archbishop of Canterbury to go there with him. Of course, the conditions are not such to allow such a visit to take place quite yet, but that does not mean that that visit is not going to take place. What is important about this retreat, the spiritual retreat that is happening at the Vatican, is that, as the spokesman of the Pope explained, this is both an ecumenical and diplomatic initiative.
Well, a peace deal was signed last year, as you know, and Mr. Machar is due to take up a position as vice president next month. How optimistic are you that this deal will work out this time around?
Well, I think that all efforts are being made for this to happen. Of course, It is not easy, and this is certainly a country that has suffered, you know, an enormous amount. It has suffered from conditions where thousands of people have been displaced, and it's certainly not going to be easy from May 12th onwards. But the plan is to make this move forward, and I think that this initiative by the Pope and by the Archbishop of Canterbury are particularly aimed at ensuring that this will be successful. So it remains to be seen what will happen next month, but certainly there is an amount of optimism, certainly at the Vatican, that they can move ahead with this.
Well, another interesting thing that is going on at the moment is South Sudan's neighbor, who's currently submerged in its own crisis, with protesters calling for the resignation of President Omar al-Bashir. Is this likely to have any spillover effect on South Sudan's peace deal, do you think?
Well, I think that this is quite separate. I think that what is happening in the Sudan is an issue that is relative to the Sudan. Of course, no one wants to see another problem in one's backyard. Certainly that's not going to facilitate things. If anything, it could complicate matters a little bit. But I think that really what is happening in the Sudan is completely separate to what is going on in South Sudan and what the plans for the future of South Sudan are at the moment.
Well, we'll have to keep our eyes on that situation. VOA Sabina Castelfranco, thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa. Well, let's have some other stories now. In Algeria, protesters are back on the streets, unrelenting in their desire to get rid of the entire ruling class. The protest started in February when ailing President Abdelaziz Bouteflika announced he would stand for a fifth term as president. He eventually withdrew this promise and then resigned, but protesters have continued protesting. On Tuesday, the police in Algeria used water cannon to disperse crowds demonstrating against the appointment of Abdelkader Ben Salah as the interim president.
It's another day and Algerians are back on the streets. They are defiant and will not accept defeat until their demands are met. Today marks the 48th day since the protests began. Young citizens want sweeping democratic reforms and a total change of the political class that has dominated since independence from France in 1962. That is why they oppose figures like Abdelkader Ben Salah, who has been appointed to succeed former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. They regard Mr. Ben Salah as too close to the ousted president, who succumbed to much pressure from the protests. He will be the interim head of state during a transition period in which fresh presidential elections will be organized. Although Mr. Ben Salah has promised to organize free and fair elections within 90 days, some Algerians say they highly doubt that.
We've come out today in order to oppose Ben Salah. They are here so the persons who are governing the country leave because they are robbing and not building the country. They are destroying it.
On stepping down, Bouteflika promised that the elections would be a part of a transition to usher in a new era. We will just have to wait and see if this promise is fulfilled.
Now, a UN-sponsored Libya National Conference, which was due to be held in 4 days' time, has been postponed. The aim of the 3-day meeting is to bring Libyans from across the country around a negotiating table to chart the country's political future. The postponement comes amid renewed conflict on the fringes of the capital, Tripoli, between some of the country's biggest and most powerful armed rivals. The latest fighting began after an attack by forces loyal to eastern Libya's general, Khalifa Haftar, who are opposed to the UN-backed government in Tripoli and the other armed groups who support it. A new date has not been set for the national conference. Meanwhile, the UN Refugee Agency has moved more than 150 refugees from the Ain Zara detention center in South Tripoli to a safe zone as fighting for Libya's capital escalates. In a statement, the agency said there had been heavy clashes near the detention center in recent days. Libya has become the main route for African migrants and refugees trying to reach Europe, with many detained if their journey fails and they are sent back home. Some 5,700 refugees and migrants are believed to be trapped in detention centers in conflict areas. In East Africa now, a fire has swept through Kenya's largest open-air market. Witnesses say the fire broke out at Gikomba Market at midnight. Emergency teams, including fire trucks from the Nairobi City Administration, reportedly arrived about 2 hours after the inferno began. The market has been frequently hit by fires, most recently in February, when several stalls were gutted. Let's get more on this now from Kenyan journalist Abi Agina. Thank you for joining us on the program. Abi, what's the latest update on the Gikomba market fire?
Well, thank you so much. So far, the fire has been contained according to the reports we are receiving, and we don't have any casualties from that fire incident that happened earlier today at the Gikomba market. But a number of various traders did lose quite a lot from this particular fire incident.
Well, we understand that the market has been frequently hit by fires, with the last one happening in February. Do we know what's causing this fire, and what is the government doing to prevent a reoccurrence?
Well, to be honest, the cause of the fire for today is still under investigations. This is according to the Nairobi Regional Commander, who did indicate that police are conducting investigations. And the Nairobi County Governor, that is Mike Mbuvi Sonko, has formed a multi-agency team that will be probing this fire incident. But in the past, we've had allegations from traders saying that the fires have become too common, and it's more of an arsonist. And perhaps some of the speculation right now from majority of the traders is that someone wants to kick them out of this particular area. If you know Nairobi pretty well, the Gikomba market is one of the largest in East Africa, serving a diverse number of countries. So to be frank with you, the fire incidents have been occurring, and most of them have been occurring during the night. And it's not clear what has been the cause of this, but as I said, suspicions are really high on targeted market takeovers by unknown businessmen.
Yeah, has anyone been punished for these fires in the past? Because, as you mentioned, the Member of Parliament says he had previously asked that the government investigate the fires. What's happened in the past? What have the investigations led to?
Unfortunately, we've never seen any investigation come to a full conclusion. And if you remember very well, even President Uhuru Kenyatta, the Kenyan president, has actually tasked the county government as well as the police units to conduct investigations. And so far, we've not had any report being released, including the latest fire that happened in 2018, last year, which hit the market in around October. As we speak, the details remain scanty on really what could be leading to this fire incidents. But ideally, where these markets are located, we also have street families that also spend the nights there, and sometimes they light up bonfires just to keep warm during the evening. Of course, claiming that this could be the reason is far-fetched, but we are always looking forward to seeing tangible results out of these investigations, which have really not borne any fruits so far.
So, Abi, just quickly, so what happens to those affected by the fire now? Will they be compensated for their losses?
Well, unfortunately, the traders will not be compensated in terms of what they lost, but the Nairobi County, as well as the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, has been fronting for a fund to be set up that can be able to be dispersed to such scenarios. And the fund is ideally in the formative stages, and there's nothing that we can guarantee and say that traders have been paid any sum of amount so far. As we speak, what has happened in the past, if a fire incident like that happens, the Nairobi County government and the Nairobi senator step in and try to use their own money to rehabilitate some of the stalls.
Yeah.
So we don't expect any formal form of compensation there.
Well, we'll be keeping our eye on the story. Kenyan journalist Abi Agina, thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you for having me on Network Africa.
Still to come on the program. The police in Uganda arrest 8 suspects over the kidnap of an American tourist. Please stay with us.